mine, and I hope we get into deep, interesting conversation and us not sit here laughing and catching up. Anyway, um, so I'm gonna start with, can you please share your name or preferred name, sorry, pronouns, and where you were born and grew up and what country you live in now? That's a lot, so if you need to repeat anything, I will do that for you.
I got it. My name is Miles. I prefer you to call me Miles. My pronouns, I would say he, she, they, them. I'm open. I was born in Barbados at St. Joseph's Hospital. I'm one of the only, not Queen Elizabeth, but yeah, so I was born in Barbados. I left Barbados when I was 5, and I live in Toronto currently. But I've gone back home multiple times for like short stints, and one time for a long time. I was there in my late 20s to early 30s.
Cool, cool. And so I just asked this as confirmation for this. So you identified I'm a part of the LGBTQ plus community.
I do identify. I'd say I'm gay.
Okay. And so what was like for you growing up? I know you mentioned that you left Barbados when you're 5, and if I remember correctly, you've been back numerous times
Yeah.
in between the two. So kind of tell me what life was like for you growing up, but also to with definitely focusing on that periods of times when you were in Barbados.
Okay. For me, originally coming to Toronto was because I think all of us as Bajans, there's something that's we're born with. Like we're very proud. I've always been proud of being Bajan, and like I feel like we're lucky to say that. So coming here when I was a kid, I was like, what is all this and what's going on? This is not as cool as Barbados. And then I eventually settled in and became a Torontonian. Then we went back to Barbados. I went back when I was 10, which was a good time to go back because I got to experience the whole 11 plus and going from like primary school to secondary school. And at that time was when I started to realize how big a deal um, being gay was in terms of like the 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 slang and the words used. And so I wasn't really like I didn't really understand because I was more of like if you're friends with someone you don't say mean things, but we like to have nicknames that are kind of not the nicest, and sometimes using homophobic slurs as like a term of endearment was a thing, and I didn't really get that, but it alarmed me right away because I knew I was different. At that time, I didn't know what to call it, but I knew I aligned with what they were hating on. So that was my first taste of, I don't know. But then when we came back to Toronto, I my mom is very progressive, so we lived in the gay village for a while as well. So I now was starting to like understand what I was, and so being in Toronto was opening, and I started to feel more free. But I love Barbados so much that I wanted to find a way to make it work, like my sexuality and my culture. So then when did I return? I returned when I was 16 for a year because I had dropped out of high school and I was rebelling. So they thought it was best that I go back to Barbados. I left when I was I did the 11 plus, left when I was 12, came back up, was a little rebellious, came back, went back down when I was 16. I met a, I, wait, was that the trip when I met you? No. So yeah, I met some people from Switzerland, and they were like European and very progressive, and they were like kind of hinting like, we know you're, you got a secret. And that was when I first started to become more comfortable. But it was ironic that it was in Barbados again, where I kept hearing buller this, buller that. And yeah, so me first being comfortable with my sexuality was funny enough in Barbados. So when I went back to Toronto and I having that freedom, I was fully then myself. I no longer pretended to have girlfriends and like, so I came into my comfortableness in Barbados, but not because of Barbados, if you know what I mean. And so when I came back to Toronto, I was more empowered because it's safer here to be it's not the safe back then. It wasn't like the safest, but it was still way safer. You know what I mean? In our minds, because the fear is there. But yeah, am I rambling? But anyways, yeah. So yeah,
No, you're fine. You actually covered a lot because I followed you as you were saying, like, you were talking about your experience when coming back to 11 plus, and then also to that 16 rebellious stage. And I remember those people.
right, yeah. Because the next year, the very next year, me, Sarah, who I met on that trip coming down, me, Sarah, and Rochelle came down to Barbados the year after when I was 17, turning 18, and I met you. And
Yep.
I remember that's when I started to like really, because Rochelle was progressive as well. Like she was very like open about sexuality. So I started finding my tribe. And I remember you were my first person in my tribe in Barbados.
Yeah.
So you're my first LGBTQ friend that I had in Barbados
Yeah.
openly. Because I'm sure I had a lot, but we never spoke about
And the thing is too, and going back in our history, because we never met, but we were adjacent all the time because we are very connected friends and family.
it.
And so there was this like, okay, we know this person, but we
Yes,
never saw each other in person.
never. Yeah, we were always a minute away from each other, but we have a lot of people in common. A
Yeah,
lot, not only just people in common, important people,
yeah,
like lifelong friends and family. So we had a lot of important people in common.
yeah. No, it's true. I mean, I was friends with your brother before like I met you, so it's like, oh, that's thing's brother, and then also too like from cousins, granny, everybody. So
Then, like best friends because I knew Izella and you had grown up with her as well. So yeah, a
yeah,
lot
a
of
lot of people, a lot of people. So now fast forwarding to actually before we do that, so Barbados, you mentioned a lot of names, Holland and homophobia, and then it's a little bit different in Toronto. And I think both of them, you have to understand, both of them were progressing on their own trajectory.
yeah, yeah.
So, um, looking back from then to now, would you say that, in your opinion, there's been gains and development in Barbados when it comes
Yeah,
to dealing with LGBT people and the homophobia?
yeah. It's not, it hasn't been a friendly, it wasn't to me, the difference is it wasn't friendly fire. I feel like in Toronto, the progression was a lot of asking, a lot of, can we sit at this table? Uh, and it was a polite way. I feel because of the oppression and the fear that when you're so afraid, I feel like a corner dog bites. And that's how I feel about Barbados, that I was more inspired by my Bajan awakening because we didn't have a choice anymore. It was no longer going to be acceptable to be afraid to be us. And so I find there was a point in when I was in Barbados, when I was living in my late 20s and early 30s, that I saw a lot of we're not asking anymore. And if you come for us, we're going to come for you. So I remember being like super proud and feeling like I won't deny who I am if I'm asked, but if I'm not asked, I'm not going to volunteer, obviously, because like I'm not gonna put myself out there like that. But I remember telling myself one day, and it was actually because of Dee Dee, I was like, the people who can be accessed because they don't have protection are standing up and martyring themselves for us without a choice, without knowing it. So in my mind, because I felt more protected, I could always come back to Toronto. Anytime I could be a part or a number, I wanted to be. So for me, I do see progression in Barbados in the queer community, but I feel like the progression from Canada and other places aren't the same. I feel like it's a gentle progression for some places, and for others, it's like we're not taking this. We're fighting. You know what I mean? And some countries have the luxury of not having to fight because their government or whoever is making it easier for them.
Yeah, true, very true. So the last time you lived in Barbados, um, what is it that made you leave? And was it an easy decision?
Okay. So I love Barbados so much. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a Bajan at heart. Crop over, you will find me there. I'm not on the side. I am jumping. I am chipping. I am at everything. I love the beaches. I love the food. I love the pace. But for me, I can't live somewhere where every other or there's a period where there's a downtime and it's not because of me, it's because of people's reactions to me or assumptions of me. So I wasn't willing to always have to like fight because sometimes you just can't take it anymore. You're just like, who are you talking to? So there is that part of you that's just like, I don't need to indulge with you. But there, after a while, it becomes frustrating. So mentally, it's hard going down for 2 to 3 weeks to see my mom and my family and friends and stuff. I don't see it, but living there after a while, you see it and feel it. And I feel like I don't see it or feel it because I'm such in a zone that I'm like I'm not indulging. But when you live there, you can't help but like hear the little comments or the snickers or the stares. It's just like it's a lot for nothing. Like it's sometimes blown out of proportion. So I left because partially because of that. Also, I wanted to meet a life partner, and I don't feel like that's something I can do there because it's not comfortable. I mean, I'm comfortable, but I don't want to put anyone who's not in that kind of situation. And then also, like, that makes me feel bad. So our love is a secret and it's always at night. So I was not comfortable with that. That became taxing. That part alone. I remember always saying, if I could find a life partner and move home, I would, because I could live in my own bubble and just be like, whatever.
I totally understand. I think in having these conversations with people when it comes to having dating and life partners, it's always very complicated.
Very.
Um, and my last question would be, you're back in Toronto, Canada. So what is life like there for you right now? Talk me through that.
Um, I when it comes to sexuality, that's not a thing. Um, I think we're way past that. I don't have those moments. I remember for a time period in my life, if you know me, I used to wear these big headsets and like listen to music because I love music. But it was also to be able to like drown out anybody having a moment towards me that was unsolicited. Like just existing sometimes pisses people off. So I used to listen to music. I haven't had to do that in years. I don't hear anyone say anything to me
No,
negative
and
or
also I must mention this, Miles, and the reason I'm kind of asking that too is, and it may not be because what you see in the news sometimes is very different from what is happening on the ground in
right.
a larger scale. Because we know that conversation that is creeping across from the southern border of the Canada, which is, the whole trans issue, the drag
Yeah.
queen issue. So I have been seeing in Canadian press these conversations slowly. I mean, right now there's the Catholic School Board that decided that they're not going to put up
Yeah.
pride flags. So in that aspect, like we are seeing this in the news, but how impactful or how different is that playing out in your everyday interactions and going out?
I feel the only thing, and I don't know, I have to be very careful how I say it because I feel like because I feel like people think that you're the encyclopedia, and it's kind of annoying because that's also part of being objectified, like, or being like singled out. Is just I can't tell you about everyone's gay experience or everyone's queer experience or everyone's trans experience because we're a part of a shared community. But I feel like that's the only thing that's kind of annoying. It's not coming from a place of anger or hate. It's coming from a place of just like I don't know, like I can't answer questions for people, and I feel like hetero cisgendered people tend to ask questions like you're supposed to know everything, and that part's kind of annoying. So that's the new world that I don't get it as much because I don't surround myself with people who are in need of that kind of information because those people educate themselves, period. But when I am in a shared environment and that happens, I think that's the only difference now. It's that it's flipped, that it's so inclusive here, but to the point where now people are coming to us for information they can find out on their own. And like
Yeah.
sometimes information is a little intrusive, and it's like, I don't know about that. So
Yeah,
it's I feel the love and that whole Catholic school board thing. It is in the streets, but again, the love is there because everyone's walking out and everyone's making their stance clear. If you come to Toronto now, like every other house has a flag. You know what I mean? The police stations, everywhere is there's flags everywhere. Flags in 7-Eleven, everywhere you go. So the love is there, but so that's not gonna really they're gonna get shut down basically. It's gonna change, but it's a flip, so it's kind of different. If you know what I mean. Do you understand what I mean?
yeah, and that's why I find it interesting because I think having lived in Toronto, it's we are so past that, something you said earlier. We're so past that type of conversation. And so it's interesting to see it pop back up. And sometimes if you're not careful, depending on where your news feed is coming from, you could
Mm-hmm.
be in some hearing it as if it's an overwhelming flip or change. Um, Whereas I think the average Canadian might not be, they're just not interested in it. That's the honest truth. They're like, that's like, what are we talking about that for? Like,
Yeah,
more concerned with how many tax dollars are being spent than
yeah,
the flag issue.
yeah,
And even if they say that it's a stupid flag, they're not more really concerned about it being raised. It's more like, why are we focusing on this?
yeah.
Um,
And
so
I mean, also the question is, you're before you made a spectacle of the situation, it wasn't in question by the said children who you feel are in danger. But now because you're bringing it up, it's more in question. So you're kind of like being a hypocrite.
and we've had which is interesting too. We've had maybe two generations for sure that have just grown up with that as being so just there. So to now be going back to this, wait, why are we doing this? And we're questioning it is really like they're like, what are you doing? Why? Um,
You really, the next time you come here, you'll see like it's a whole new world, Renee Boo. Like the younger generation, I see them and I'm so happy. Like there's times when I cry because I'm just like, I don't regret not being a part of it because I know I was, because we wouldn't have got here if we didn't take those licks for them. But I'm so proud and I'm so happy when you see like 14-year-olds and there's like a group of like mixed group and you can see that they're embracing each other and sexuality is a part of it in
yeah.
terms of like
Specialty,
accessing
gender expression.
gender, yes, all of that. It's
Yeah.
like it's a whole new world, boo, and it's a safer and a better world. But yeah, there is a little roadblocks with those people, but yeah, it's a beautiful thing to see. It's
Yeah.
definitely beautiful.
And I wanted to just, well, it's not really a question, but you could speak to it too, because I mean, the Caribbean experience as a Barbadian there is slightly different. We do get together, but it's not necessarily like because there are just a lot more Jamaicans, let's be honest. I
You know what there isn't. That's not true. They're in London. There's a lot of Jamaicans. There's a lot of islands who claim Jamaica, but they're really from like St. Vincent and other places. But they're so small, people don't know where they are, so they just choose to go with them saying they're Jamaican.
yeah, but what I'm saying though is or what I was trying to get to is even in the Caribbean culture context, um, these topics are really not as taboo or as much of an issue. And you
No.
see a total flip when you go back. Like if you're living in Canada and you go back home, and all of a sudden you're having conversations with your family and extended family in Canada. That's you are you.
Yeah.
So I always find that interesting.
It's very interesting. And like when you go to like Barbados in the water and stuff, like it's just I don't know. I feel like for a lot of us West Indians and from the queer community and the LGBTQ community, I feel like for the longest time we had to either be our queer selves or our cultural selves, which is like our Bajan side, our Trini side, and all that. And to like for me to go to crop over, for example, I would shed all my queerness to just jump in and have a good moment, some soca and some rum punch, you know what I mean? And just live in my Bajanness and then shut that off and come back home to my queerness. And now I feel like we're getting so much closer to that. We can be exactly who we are in terms of like those are both parts of me that should exist at once. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the day that will be my that will be the one of the best days of my life because I feel so proud to be a Bajan, but I am who I am. I'm who God made me to be. So I can be everything I am. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Well,
that day's gonna rock.
thank you so
No
much for
problem.
sharing with me. It's been great talking to you, and always a pleasure.
Always. I hope I made sense. I'm sorry if I rambled. I love you so much.
It's fine. You were perfect. I just wanted to have, the listeners know who you are. So ramble as much as you want,
Oh,
and thank you for sharing.
okay. I love you, boo. Thank no problem.